Hi, and welcome to How Do I BI, a many-part screencast series on using SQL Server Analysis Services 2008. It's based on my book, Smart Business Intelligence Solutions with Microsoft SQL Server 2008. I'm Lynn Langett, a developer evangelist with Microsoft in Southern California. In this screencast, I'm going to talk about implementing SQL Server Analysis Services database level security. This security will apply to both OLAP cubes and data mining models. Before we go to the screencast, we're going to look at FAQs and gotchas. So under the FAQs, the most important thing is to define your roles at the appropriate levels of granularity in SQL Server Analysis Services. As we'll see in the screencast, you have the ability to set security at the level of the entire database, the data sources, cubes, dimensions, all the way down to individual cells, and similar levels of granularity through data mining structures and models. So we'll take a look at the procedures for implementation in just a minute. Before we do that, I'll remind you of a couple of gotchas around security. By default, only members of the OLAP administrators group can access any of the objects created in SSAS using BIDs. Also, you're going to want to secure at the role rather than individual user level. If you need security that is more specific or granular than that you see available through the BIDS interface, you do have the ability through custom MDX, as I have had some customers request to create custom security schemes. And with that, we're going to go ahead and go to the screencast. We're going to take a look at using the ability to create roles inside of BIDS to define security permissions for SSAS objects. And these objects would include OLAP cubes and data mining models. In order to do this, I've opened BIDS and loaded the sample application in VentureWorks, which contains both cubes and data mining models. And then I have right-clicked on the roles container and selected New Role. By default, there are no roles defined, and the only users that are permitted to access SSAS objects are those who are members of the local OLAP administrators group. So in the role interface, there are several tabs in the BIDS designer that we will discuss in terms of considerations for creating security roles. So the first gives the name to the particular role, and then we'll just put that this is a test role. And we can define security at the level of the entire role if we wish to, or more granularly. And as a best practice, you want to define security as close and as granular as is practical for your business requirements. So you can see that the permissions available are full control for administrator, process the database, or read the definition. Now, don't be confused with the analysis services database definition versus a relational database. The definition of a database in analysis services is a container for SSAS objects, and these will include both cubes and data mining models. So it might be the situation where you don't wish to have any permissions assigned at this level. For the purposes of demonstration, I'll click on Process Definition and Read Definition. We'll then go to the Membership tab, which is a separate tab here, and this is where we specify users or groups for this role. And inside of here, I'll click the Add button, and then I'll just enter Administrator, which again, it would not be a best security practice, but this is just for purposes of demonstration. Typically, rather than an individual user, you would pre-create roles within your Windows environment, whether a single server, so local roles, or if it was domain joined, then domain groups that would be associated with certain permission sets inside of analysis services. So you should work with your network administrator to have these roles defined if that's not part of your job function. Then we'll go over to data sources, and you'll see that we have one data source defined inside of this solution that we want to assign permission to, and this is AdventureWorks DW. Currently there's no access because the default is no access. If we click on the access button, we have the ability to read, and we can specify read definition if that is part of a need in terms of permissions for our particular role group. We'll then go over to cubes, and we'll see that we have 2 cubes in this particular solution, and again, the access by default is none, and if I click the drop down, then we have the option to assign read or read and write if we have enabled write back in the cube, which will do that in a separate section here. So we're going to go ahead and set read on AdventureWorks, and then notice a separate type of permission is local cube and drill through access. Local cube means the ability to save a subset of the cube as a local cube file that can be processed by certain client applications such as Excel. By default, this is set to none, So you can here set drill through, which is the ability to display information that supports the creation of a particular value, a measure value, or the ability to set up a local cube. So the permissions here are none, drill through, or drill through in local cube. And then notice process is selected because we selected that on the level of the database. We then can go more granularly all the way down to the level of a cell. Before we do that though, we're going to look at the dimensions, and the dimensions can be shared across cubes. So because we have the one cube selected for read, automatically we've gotten read for all these particular dimensions. And you notice here in the dimension section, the top selection is select dimension set, and then we click the drop down. We can say all database dimensions or all AdventureWorks cube dimensions. So if you had more than one cube and you had some dimensions that were not shared across those cubes, you could select them here. Underneath the list of dimensions, we now have it set to read because of our previous action. If we click the drop down under access, we could set, for example, one of our dimensions, let's say product, to read to read and write. And this would be the case again where we'd have write back enabled on the particular cube if we wanted to do that. We then can go even more granular and click on the Dimension Data tab in the Role Designer. And you can see that it is set by default to the first dimension that's defined for this particular solution. So AdventureWorks DW, the account dimension. If we open this drop-down box, we can pick a particular dimension of interest. So let's go with our product, as we've been looking at earlier, and click OK. And then we have two abilities to work with the product dimension. We can work with it from a basic permission setting standpoint or from an advanced. And because we had already adjusted the settings for product in the dimension designer, I'm going to actually pick a different one here. So I'm going to pick, maybe promotion. And then you can see underneath promotion, we then have the ability to select the attribute hierarchy of interest. And in this case, we're looking at discount percent. And then we can assign that all members should be associated with the security role, or we can deselect all members, or we can actually go in and we can say individual members. So we're going very, very granularly now. And this is all through a GUI. Of course, the underlying metadata that's being written here is XMLA along with MDX. So if we click on Advanced, you'll see that we're still working with the same attribute, the discount percent, and we could adjust that if we wanted to. And then we need to enter custom MDX to allow particular sets of members, allowed member sets. We can type in the MDX, or we have access to the MDX editor by clicking the build button. That'll just open up the familiar MDX builder to help us to more quickly create MDX expressions that are work. So you see we have metadata and functions. Underneath, we see that we have a denied member set already created, and that was through the actions we took on the basic tab. We can also set the default member, which is kind of one of those hidden gems in the interface. It is very intelligent to set the default member appropriate to the role. For example, if you are a global organization and you're assigning permissions to certain continents, you may want to set the default member for South America to South America, for example. And once you're done with that, then you could go more granularly, even below the level of dimension members, all the way down to the level of cell data. So we'll click on that tab and we'll select the AdventureWorks cube. Notice we have a link here where we could actually test cube security if we wanted to with this particular permission set, which is a nice feature. And we can enable read permissions, and then we can click on the build button next to the edit MDX to create a custom MDX statement using the MDX builder. We can also enable read contingent, and that would be based on some condition, usually our having an IF, including an IF in the MDX expression. Certain condition is met, and you can enable read-write permissions here for certain sections of the cube very granularly. So that is the cube security inside of SSAS. In addition to that, as I said in the introduction, through the roles, you can also set security on data mining structures. So we're going to click on that tab next. And again, because we set the read and process settings at the level of the database, they are selected for the various mining structures that we have as part of the sample. So for example, the targeted mailing structure is set, as everything else, to no access by default. If we click the drop down, we could have a read permission for all the data mining models contained in that structure, and we could set drill through if that was part of our business requirement. If we wanted to set security more granularly, if we click on a particular mining structure, then all the mining models that are associated with that will be displayed below in the same mining structure tab. So on targeted mailing, this contains 4 different mining models: decision tree, clustering, naive Bayes, and neural net. These are all, of course, also set to none, so under access. So if we wanted to enable simply one or more of those mining models to be available for reading or reading and writing, we could do that. We could also set drill through. Read definition is turned on because it's been set at the database level, and we could also set browse permission for that particular mining model. So when you are creating roles, the sequence is to determine the level of permissions at the lowest level of granularity for cubes. That's all the way down to individual cells. For mining structures, that's all the way down to individual mining models. Determine special permissions such as drill through and write enabling sections of cubes, and then implement those permissions via roles that are associated to groups that have been created in your operating system. So that is roles inside of SSAS.